Well, shalom. My name is Todd Bennett, and this is the weekly audio recording of the Shema Yisrael newsletter titled Inspecting Your Fruit and Preparing for the Harvest. This was first published in written form on day 6 of month 6, also known as September 3rd, 2022 on the Roman calendar. Now, in the last message, I mentioned why the 8th month on the Roman calendar was named after Roman Emperor Augustus. His nickname was Octavius, which actually means 8th. Over the past week, we've transitioned from month 5 to month 6 on the Creator's calendar, since the renewed moon was visible after sunset on August 28, 2022. We've also transitioned from month 8 to month 9 on the Roman calendar. Now, the 9th month on the Roman calendar is called September, and the Latin root of the word septem actually means 7. So why is the 9th month called the 7th on the Roman calendar? I like to point this discrepancy out every year because it reveals the ancient origins of the Roman calendar, when the year began in March, right around the time when the Creator's calendar begins. I repeatedly remind people about the fact that calendars can either unite or divide. The calendar promoted by the Roman Catholic Church and named after Pope Gregory, most of the world is under the Gregorian calendar. That calendar helps to separate and divide people away from the Creator. And of course, it's all part of the plan. If you examine many of the early councils of the Roman Catholic Church, it's evident that the trend was to deviate from all things Jewish. Of course, the Sabbath and the appointed times are not Jewish. Rather, they belong to Yahuwah and are observed by His covenant assembly. If we don't know what time it is, we cannot obey the commandments properly, and we cannot properly assemble and meet with Yahuwah at His appointed times. Again, all part of the plan of organized man-made religion. Now, there was a time when people were fairly close on their reckoning of time, and generally those calendars revolved around the harvest cycles. In years past, people were more connected with the cycles of the seasons and the harvest. They understood the intimate relationship between those events and time itself. Anyone dwelling in a land in days past would know that we are on the home stretch right now. We already harvested the grains for bread. Now we're approaching the fruit harvest. While the grains sustain life, the fruits bring joy, especially the grapes. Nowadays, people go to the store to buy whatever they want, whenever they want it. They look down at their phones instead of up into the shamayim to determine time. Barely anyone is concerned with the cycles built into creation by the Creator, except maybe when it comes to their wardrobe. When the cold weather starts coming, they change from summer to winter and all that. But generally, people do not look at these cycles to determine their food and their diet and time itself. Is any wonder then that modern religions have strayed so far from their origins? Very few people even know what time it is. So, how can they follow the Creator of time? Last week I mentioned how day 1 of month 6 marked the third and final ascent of Moses up on to Mount Sinai. He cut new stone tablets, and Israel was hoping for a second chance. They were relying upon their mediator to literally do the heavy lifting as Moses cut the stone tablets and carried them up the mountain. Israel needed a mediator to renew the covenant, and Moses descended on day 10 of month 7 with the renewed tablets of the covenant. Those of us who understand that Yeshua is the mediator of the renewed covenant should remember how Yeshua spent 40 days and 40 nights in the wilderness. We should also remember how he was here on earth for 40 days and 40 nights between the resurrection and the ascension. That's presuming that the Greek word hemera in Acts 1:3 refers to a full day, including night and day, and there's every reason to believe that it does. So it's no coincidence that Yeshua began and then ended his work with 40-day periods, just as Moses hallmarked his mediation with 3 40-day and 40-night periods. And I believe those who believe Moses and follow Yeshua should be anticipating another 40-day period from Yeshua the Messiah. We should be waiting patiently like wise virgins for Yeshua to descend. And day 10 of month 7 is a good place to focus that attention. Remember that day 10 of month 7 is Rosh Hashanah, head of the year, of a Jubilee year. Day 10 of month 7 is literally New Year's Day of a Jubilee. It's when the shofar sounds long. We read in Leviticus 23, and you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years for yourself, 7 times 7 years. And the time of the 7 Sabbaths of years shall be for you 49 years. Then you shall cause the shofar of the Jubilee to sound on the 10th day of the 7th month, on the Day of Atonement. You shall make the shofar to sound throughout all your land, and you shall consecrate the 50th year and proclaim liberty throughout all the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. And each of you shall return to his possession, and each of you shall return to his family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee to you. In it you shall neither sow nor reap what grows of its own accord, nor gather the grapes of your untended vine, for it is the jubilee. It shall be set apart to you. You shall eat its produce from the field. Remember last week how I mentioned that Judaism calls Yom Teruah, which is day 1 of month 7, they call that Rosh Hashanah every year. That's a distraction from the fulfillment that we saw when Yeshua was born on the day of blasting, Yom Teruah. We don't celebrate Rosh Hashanah on day 1 of month 7. We celebrate the birth of King Messiah. In fact, there's only one time that Rosh Hashanah is used in the Tanakh, and it refers to the 10th day of the month. And we read that in Ezekiel 41. As a result, I believe that day 10 of month 7 will be a significant appointed time the Messiah will fulfill in the future. Now, do you recall the hint of the Jubilee shofar, the Yovalim shofarot, that we see in the Hebrew text at the Jericho event? Let's take a look at that. See, I have given Jericho into your hand, its king and the mighty men of valor. You shall march around the city, all you men of war. You shall go all around the city once. This you shall do 6 days. And 7 priests shall bear 7 trumpets of ram horns. Those are Yovalim shofarot, before the ark. But the 7th day you shall march around the city 7 times, and the priest shall blow the trumpets. It shall come to pass when they make a long blast with the ram's horn, the yovel, and when you hear the sound of the trumpet, the shofar, that all the people shall shout with a great shout. Then the wall of the city will fall down flat, and the people shall go up, every man straight before him. That's Joshua 6, 1 through 5. Now, one of the first things the Israelites did when they finally entered the land was to confront the moon god Yerach at his Canaanite headquarters in Jericho, which is Jericho in English. They conquered the land under the leadership of Yeshua. The fact that Moses changed his name from Hosea to Yeshua, is no coincidence. Nor is it coincidence that one of the chief prophets to the house of Israel was named Hosea. The fact that the shofars are described as Yovalim shofarot is purposeful. These patterns of the past are for us to learn from, and they are hints to our future. After Yahweh conquered Jericho, accompanied by shofar blasts and shouts, the children of Israel then moved into Canaan and began to enjoy the bounty of the new home that Yahweh provided for them. Every year during this season, they were supposed to be thanking Yahweh that he renewed the covenant, and they were supposed to be keeping an eye on the fruit harvests as they made preparations to take their best fruits and present them before Yahweh during Sukkot. In my last correspondence, I talked about the importance of bearing fruit before the harvest, and I find that the subject of bearing fruit can sometimes fall within the realm of the abstract, and I thought the subject warranted further examination, especially now as we're looking forward to Sukkot. After the creation of mankind, we read the following: Then Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. Man was supposed to be fruitful, and was placed in the Garden of Eden to tend the garden that Yahweh had planted. Man did not do the difficult preparation, the heavy lifting. Rather, he was permitted to work it and receive his sustenance from the fruit of the trees. He was entrusted to watch over and maintain the creation of Elohim. The focus of all of creation is fruitfulness and multiplication within the framework of the instructions of Elohim, and man has an integral and special role to play in the process. Man was made in the image of Elohim, which means that he's supposed to represent and be the literal expression of Elohim within creation. Of course, we all know that the man and the woman failed and were later ejected from the garden. Instead of watching and tending the Garden of Eden, man was relegated to working the ground and planting. He now needed to do the heavy lifting in order to feed himself. The scripturals recount his fate. In the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for dust you are, and to dust you shall return. You see, while man was in the garden, he was actually in the kingdom, and his needs were provided for as long as he obeyed. When he decided to disobey, his responsibility was taken away. He was removed from the kingdom, and his focus then shifted to feeding himself, which would involve a lot of hard work. This is one of the first things that I point out to all of my groups in Israel as we consider the appointed times. It's important to understand the enormous transition and paradigm shift that took place from living in the garden planted by Elohim, filled with fruit-bearing trees that he provided for food, to a life of constantly toiling, sowing, and reaping. Thankfully, the yearly cycle of the appointed times, beginning at the grain harvest and ending with the fruit harvest, shows us the path back to Eden, back to paradise. They reveal how the curse will be lifted and reversed. After the fall, man's condition continued to deteriorate, and most of mankind ended up rebelling against Yahweh. We read that during the days of Noah. It says, Elohim looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. After the flood, we read the following promise and command. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and day and night shall not cease. So Elohim blessed Noah and his sons, and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Mankind was once again instructed to be fruitful. This was a planetary reset, and interestingly we read, Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. So Noah was a gardener, and the first thing that he planted was a vineyard. This emphasis on the vineyard was purposeful. After Noah partook of the fruit of the vine, we read about an incident involving Ham and likely Canaan, his younger son, and we read about that in Genesis 9:24. That event set the stage for the descendants of Canaan to prepare the covenant land for the descendants of Shem. Noah proclaimed, Blessed be Yahuwah, the Elohim of Shem, and may Canaan be his servant. And that's exactly what happened. when the descendants of Shem, through Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, became the covenant assembly of Israel. Just as Adam did not do any of the work setting up the Garden of Eden, so Israel did not do any of the work preparing the covenant land. I've given you a land for which you did not labor, and cities which you did not build, and you dwell in them. You eat of the vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant. The Canaanites had been responsible for preparing the land for the Israelites. When Yahuwah brought Israel into the land, he was demonstrating that he would be the conduit for a return to the garden. That they would be a conduit, They were headed in the right direction, although they still needed to work for their daily bread in the land. When they were in the wilderness, they were given daily bread, but they enjoyed none of the fruits. When they entered the land, they enjoyed the fruits of the trees and the vines, but needed to pray and work for their daily bread. Another thing I like to point out to my groups in Israel is the fact that the covenant land did not have a mighty river like the Nile or the Euphrates. This was intentional. It says, "For the land which you go to possess is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and watered it by foot as a vegetable garden, but the land which you cross over to possess is a land of hills and valleys, which drinks water from the rain of heaven, a land for which Yahuwah your Elohim cares. The eyes of Yahuwah your Elohim are always on it, from the beginning of the year to the very end of the year." So it's important to understand the water was not ever present in the land. It needed to be released from the heavens at the proper times. The pagans worshipped their river gods as their source of life. The Israelites needed to learn to remain steadfast and put their faith and trust in Yahuwah to provide for all their needs at the right time. The covenant land is not only different, it's special. The eyes of Yahuwah are always on it, and he cares for it. And he's not finished with it, by the way, either. Those who serve him should be very interested in this parcel of land, because one day the covenant people will be returned and planted in the covenant land to bear fruit with King Yeshua. And by the way, he's preparing that land as well. Highways and roads, and if you go into the region of Samaria, there's empty houses and that you could almost classify as mansions scattered all over the place, and one has to wonder why all this is there. Well, it could be that he's preparing homes and vineyards and highways and byways for a people who will be returned to that land in the future. Well, that's why an important part of the mission of Shema Israel is to connect people with the special land of Yahuwah Elohim. The covenant land is the place where Yahuwah chooses to place his name, and we know from the prophets that he will once again place his name there. If it's special to him, then it should be special to those who love him, and this is one of those issues that that's the heart of a person. Make no mistake, there is a clear distinction between the land and the people who live in the land. The prophet Isaiah actually provided a song regarding the land, being the location of the vineyard of Yahuwah. And we will read that as follows. "Now, let me sing to my well-beloved a song of my beloved regarding his vineyard. My well-beloved has a vineyard on a very fruitful hill. He dug it up and cleared out its stones and planted it with the choicest vine. He built a tower in its midst and also made a winepress in it. So he expected it to bring forth good grapes, but it brought forth wild grapes. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, judge, please, between me and my vineyard. What more could have been done to my vineyard that I have not done in it? Why then, when I expected it to bring forth good fruits, did it bring forth wild grapes? And now, please, let me tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will take away its hedge, and it shall be burned, and break down its walls, and it shall be trampled down. I will lay it waste. It shall not be pruned or dug, but there shall come up briars and thorns. I will also command the clouds that they rain no rain on it. For the vineyard of Yahweh of hosts is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are his pleasant plant. He looked for justice, but behold oppression, for righteousness, but behold a cry for help. So this prophecy in the form of a song reveals that the vineyard of Yahweh is the house of Israel. Israel was planted in the covenant land in order to produce food. Instead of good grapes on the vine, the vineyard was producing wild grapes, ba'ashim. The Hebrew word ba'ashim refers to something that stinks. It's linked to the stink of the Nile due to the dead fish, and the stink in Egypt due to the dead frogs during the plagues. The prophet Jeremiah provided a similar account. Yet I had planted you a noble vine, sorek, a seed of highest quality. How then have you turned before me into the degenerate branches of a foreign vine? Here we see that Israel was once a choice and noble vine that produced fruit, but that vine became foreign and produced degenerate fruit. In the Hebrew, the word degenerate means turn aside. So Israel was producing fruit, just not the right fruit. They had turned away from Yahweh and followed other gods. Their conduct was abominable, and their fruit became a stench. As a result, Israel was uprooted and removed from the land. Now, this requirement to bear fruit has never changed, and it's the easiest way to determine the true identity of Israel. While many may claim to be Israel because they are Jewish, their fruits tell the real story. We don't need any DNA tests. We simply need to examine and inspect the fruit. According to Yeshua the Messiah, there are many who are going to be surprised and shocked when they stand before him. There will be many who think that they know the Messiah and sincerely believe that they bore good fruit. To their shock and horror, Yeshua is going to cut them off, along with others who think they are part of the kingdom because of their DNA. And we read about that in Matthew 7:21 through 23 and Matthew 8:10 through 12. As we enter into the fruit harvest, we all need to inspect our fruit. And the question is not simply whether you are bearing fruit. It is necessary to determine whether your fruit is classified as good, or is it a stench to Yahweh. This is a critical issue, and in my next message I'll explore the distinction and look at what Yahweh considers to be good fruit. Shabbat Shalom.